If something in your relationship feels off, but you can't explain why. If you've spent years trying harder in the relationship and yet it just keeps hurting, this space is for you. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism podcast. Today, we are talking about covert narcissistic dynamics as compared to normal marriage struggles. So imagine this. Your partner was late getting home from work, and you had dinner plans together, but everything has now fallen through. When they get home, you say something very careful and measured, something that, you've likely practiced already many times in your head. And so you say, I think I remember you saying you'd be home by 6. Now, the conversation already feels tense, even though nothing has occurred. Nothing dramatic has happened yet. There's no yelling, no raised voices, no slamming of doors. It's simply that familiar tightening in the room, the kind where your shoulders tense before your mind is fully caught up. You're standing in the kitchen, the conversation seems ordinary on the surface, but your body knows how quickly this could tip in the wrong direction. So you continue, but I could be remembering it wrong. Maybe I misunderstood you. You now leave that space where maybe you were wrong here, even though you're fairly certain that you're not, but you want a safe conversation. So you make space for the possibility that you might not be right or that they remember it differently. Yet you're still holding your breath, waiting to see how this goes, how they take this. Now, instead of escalation, they respond, yeah, I might have said that. I knew I had a late meeting. I think I told you about it, but maybe I forgot to. Does this sound familiar to you? Not if you're listening to the Covert Narcissism podcast. But in this example, no one is shamed. No one is blamed. No one has to win the battle. And instead of the moment spiraling, it actually softens. There's a pause. In this healthy dynamic, that pause is a gift. There's a space there for both people to recognize that maybe I'm remembering it wrong, and it really isn't that big of a deal to figure out, who's at fault here and who's to blame, because that's one of the things the covert narcissist really focuses in on. In this situation, everyone can exhale. Shoulders drop a little bit, and the space is safe. You're not arguing about who is right. You're collaborating on what actually happened, or at least how best to move forward. You're working together. Things stay calm, even safe, and you feel heard. You leave the interaction still intact as yourself, not in this fight or flight response mode, and quietly, something important lands in your body. And that is that this is what healthy sounds like. Now, if this feels foreign to you, I do understand that. This example might have caused you to tighten your shoulders back at the words, I think I remember you saying you'd be home by 6. Maybe your past experience is not being met with that same space of grace. Instead of meeting you there, the other person takes that space, crushes it, and slams the door behind them. You might hear things like, no, that's not what I said. You always twist things, or you never listen. I know exactly what I said. The room tightens instead of softening. Shoulders clench, and the air gets heavy. There is no shared reality here. There is no space for multiple perspectives, only room for theirs. You begin explaining yourself, backpedaling, replaying the conversation in your head, trying to reconstruct every word. What actually happens is your willingness to consider their perspective, to give that space that maybe you remembered it wrong, actually becomes proof, to them at least, that you are unreliable. And this gets used against you. You say, maybe I am remembering it wrong, hoping to find softness, grace, empathy, cooperation. But no. Instead, you're met with, well, of course you are. I know I'm right. And from there just is no give. Eventually, you stop offering that safe space yourself, not because you are rigid or unwilling, but because it's never actually safe. That contrast right there is a huge difference between normal marriage struggle and covert narcissistic dynamics. The concept of this is just marriage and marriage is hard carries a lot of weight, especially for people who value loyalty, dedication, personal growth, family values, cooperation. It sounds reasonable to say, you know what, marriage is hard. And it is. After all, normal marriages do have their issues and they do have their struggles. It is part of trying to get along with others in an intimate setting and daily life and within your own space, your own home. So it does make sense to say marriage is hard and it does take work. The trouble comes when those phrases are used not to normalize temporary difficulty. I mean, again, every marriage has temporary difficulties. But the trouble comes when these phrases begin to dismiss ongoing harm, problems that don't reconcile, that continue over and over, that show deeper issues than miscommunications. This is more than marriage is hard. Yet over time, that phrase can become the very thing that silences you. In healthy relationships, giving grace is mutual. Both people can be tired, imperfect, and occasionally even defensive without the relationship becoming unsafe. Grace flows in both directions. And accountability? Accountability follows that grace. But when grace only flows one way, when one person is always expected to soften, is always expected to doubt themselves, is always expected to make room for the other person, while the other person remains immovable, firm, and uncooperative, then something very different is happening here. In healthy marriages, two people can remember the same conversation very differently without it becoming a battle for dominance. One person might say, "This is how I remember it," while the other responds, "Boy, that's not how I meant it. I might could see how it landed that way, but I didn't remember it that way." There's room for fallibility. Memory is understood as being part of being human, not perfect, human. And it's not used as a weapon against each other. When defensiveness shows up, and it does in any relationship, it has an end point. Someone takes a step back and reflects, circles back and says, "Hey, I was defensive earlier and that wasn't fair to you." Repair may take time, but it happens. The relationship becomes clearer rather than more confusing. And over time, conflict actually builds trust instead of destroying it. In covert narcissistic dynamics, those same moments that might otherwise be considered normal marriage struggles play out very differently. They don't build trust. Memory is not collaborative, it's authoritative. Statements like, "I know exactly what I said," or "that never happened." They're not invitations for dialogue here. They don't open the door for understanding. They're declarations of dominance. There is no curiosity about your experience, your perspective. There's no acknowledgement of impact, and there's no openness to mutual growth. The goal is not shared clarity, but to control the narrative. This is where the dynamic often begins to resemble a very familiar scene from Peanuts. Charlie Brown trying to kick the football. He isn't asking for something unreasonable here. He just wants to kick the football. And Lucy never outright refuses him. Instead, she creates the appearance of cooperation. "This time will be different. I promise you can trust me." And yet, every time, just as he commits to kicking that ball, she pulls it away. What makes that scene painful is not that Charlie Brown hopes, it's that Lucy never backs down. She never actually gives him what she keeps implying she will. There is no moment of real concession, no space finally offered. The pattern never changes. This is exactly how certainty functions in covert narcissistic dynamics. The appearance of flexibility is there, but the outcome's always the same. They are very sure of themselves, and they are very sure that they are right, and they are very sure that you are wrong. And the conversation ends exactly where it always does. When you offer softness or uncertainty by saying, "I might be remembering it wrong, or maybe that's just how I heard it," these are normal ways of interacting with people with compassion and care. This is flexibility, but it's not returned. It's just taken. Your humility becomes evidence that, well, clearly you are unreliable, while their certainty becomes unquestionable truth. Instead of collaboration, you get correction. Instead of shared reality, you get dismissal. And just like Charlie Brown, You begin to wonder if this time will finally be different, if maybe that football will stay put. But over time, it never does. And you begin to doubt your own memory. You replay conversations in your own head, rehearse your words in advance, and search for the perfect phrasing that might finally protect you from being shut down or blamed. You believe that if you can just be clear enough, gentle enough, precise enough, then the outcome will change. But it never does. The football is still pulled away because it was never meant to stay. This is one of the clearest distinctions in this entire episode. Healthy relationships involve give and take, not perfectly, but consistently. Both people bend at times. They both give. Both people make room for each other. Both people eventually offer something back to the other person. In covert narcissistic dynamics, this doesn't happen. There is give from you without return from them. You offer empathy, the benefit of the doubt. You do the emotional labor, while the other person, they just absorb it without ever offering the same in response to you. Eventually, you are exhausted. Not because marriage is hard, but because you are carrying the entire emotional load by yourself. You are the only one making space, softening your tone, trying to find the right words, questioning your memory, and trying to keep the peace. The other person remains unmoved, certain, and untouched by the effort that you are pouring in. From the outside, this often goes unnoticed. There are no dramatic scenes necessarily. There's no obvious cruelty necessarily from the outside. Outsiders see calm, they see stability, sometimes they even see charm. But what they do not see is how carefully you choose your words, how much you edit yourself, and how unsafe your honesty is in this relationship. They see peace from the outside, but you live in constant constraint. Now, here is something that I said just a little bit ago. Healthy relationships allow for mutual fallibility. Both people get to be wrong. Both people get to soften. Both people get to repair. When one person is always certain and the other is always doubting, that's not balance. That's hierarchy. It's domination. And hierarchy and domination inside an intimate relationship destroy the relationship. Now, this week, I want to invite you into something quieter than action and more powerful than analysis. Rather than in focusing on what you argue about, I want you to pay attention to what happens after you argue. What happens when you offer grace? This is not an assignment that requires confrontation, escalation, or proving some point. It is simply about observation, about noticing how space is treated once you offer it. At some point this week, you may naturally find yourself softening a statement or questioning your own certainty, not just with the covert narcissist in your world, actually, but with other important people in your life. You might say something like, I could be remembering this wrong, or maybe that's just how I heard it, or I'm not totally sure, but this is how it felt to me. If and when that moment arises, notice what happens in your body and notice what happens in the room immediately afterward. Does the space you offered come back to you with warmth and grace? Does the other person respond with their own reflection, humility, or curiosity? Do you feel the room soften even a little? Or does the space collapse? Does the tone sharpen, the temperature drop, the conversation quietly shut down? You're not looking for a dramatic reaction. Just what direction does the energy go? Afterward, check in with yourself gently. Do you feel safer, steadier, and more connected to that person? Or do you feel smaller, more uncertain, emotionally pulled inward? Notice whether your body relaxes or does it brace up with tension. Notice whether you feel more like yourself or less. It's important that you don't turn this into a test or trap for yourself or anyone else. You're not trying to catch someone in the wrong here. You're simply observing and gathering information. Patterns reveal themselves without confrontation when we stop overriding what we feel. You do not need labels to complete this assignment. You do not need to draw conclusions. All you're doing this week is noticing whether grace is mutual or one sided in the many relationships that you have in your life, friends, family, coworkers, and how that reality lands in your body is really important to your own healing. Your nervous system already recognizes the answer of whether a person is safe or not, even if your mind hasn't figured it out yet or has talked yourself out of it over and over. At the end of the week, you might jot down a few words or phrases that describe how these moments felt to you. Not what was said, but how it landed. And remember, awareness is not a demand for immediate change. It's just the beginning of orientation. Next week, we're going to talk about something that many people notice long before they understand it. The strange sense of calm that shows up when you stop explaining yourself. Not because things are resolved, not because you've suddenly become detached from that person, but because you've stepped out of a dynamic that constantly required you to justify your reality. We'll explore why explaining feels so necessary in certain relationships, how it quietly trains you to overfunction emotionally, and why the relief you feel when you stop isn't avoidance or apathy. It's your nervous system recognizing safety. This is not about becoming cold and withholding. It's about understanding why clarity doesn't come from better explanations when the other person is not available to hear you anyways. If you've ever felt guilty for pulling back, quieter when you stop defending yourself, or confused by the peace that follows disengagement, then this conversation is for you. We'll walk through it slowly, without judgment, and without asking you to become someone that you're not. If this episode gave you language that you are struggling to find, I am really glad that you are here. You are not overreacting for wanting shared reality, for wanting your perspective to count, for wanting your feelings to matter. You are not broken for needing reciprocal relationships. If you would like support as you continue sorting through all of this, you can learn more about my resources and coaching at covertnarcissism.com. And if this conversation resonated, please subscribe so you do not miss any other future episodes just like this one. Until next time, I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. If there were ever an audience that I wish did not have to exist, it would be this one, because of what it means you've lived through. I'm truly sorry that you understand this so deeply, and I'm really glad that you're here. May this be a place of safety, clarity, and peace. You are not alone anymore, and you don't have to figure this out by yourself. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. And if you'd like to learn more about the support, resources, or coaching that is available for you, you can visit covertnarcissism.com. While I hate it for everyone who understands what I am talking about, I'm really glad that you're here, and I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson, Covert Narcissism Podcast, and CNG Life Coaching is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes. It is not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. Renee shares stories from her personal experience as well as from those that she has worked with for several years. Her material does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or support a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and the information provided. Thank you.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.